Meet AUSTRORAPTOR, the long-snouted Dromeosaur from Argentina Allen Formation. This extremely underrated raptor has roamed swamps and marshes of what is now South America from 76 to 68 million years ago. Join me to a journey back in time as I reconstruct a feathered dinosaur from sphere to a functional 3D model. As always, we have to start somewhere, which is the base sculpting. I began my reconstruction by bringing a skeletal reference to my Blender file. Astro would reach around 6 meters in length and had a 1.4 to 1.6 meters in hip height, making it one of the largest Dromeosaurids. I've grown quite used to mixing modeling and sculpting into my workflow. I prefer to model the smaller parts because that's where I have most control over my work. Some might think AUSTRORAPTOR was a merciless apex predator. Well, if you think that, you're not wrong. It was merciless to fish, as its diet most likely consisted of them. But you might ask, how do we know that? This Dromeosaur had an elongated skull and non-serrated teeth, very similar, well, to Spinosaurids. And we are almost 100% sure that Spinosaurus was a piscivore. Now we're at the final segment of this chapter, which is the anatomy, which probably has to be one of the hardest parts to accomplish. The biggest challenge had to be not really sculpting, but interpreting what is in the graph, because I've used the Deinonychus musculoskeletal reconstruction by Matt Dempsey, and I had to figure out some differences. AUSTRORAPTOR, for example, had pretty long legs. It was overall a slim dinosaur, but to my surprise, its arms were pretty short. Okay, maybe not that short, but pretty short for a Dromeosaurid. And yeah, as you can see, we are finishing up here, and it's time to look at our work and appreciate it. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, this was extremely confusing to me, but I figured out this. There is two ways of optimizing feathered models. Option A, you sculpt the feathers, and option B, you add hair cards, which are planes with alpha images of feathers. And I have decided to do both, actually, in order to exercise my skills and explore new possibilities. First, let's start with feather sculpting. This is where things get a bit interesting. I've started by creating around 10 new VDMs, mostly based on work from other people on the websites such as ArtStation and such. Okay, about placing these VDMs, I was a bit reckless, but if I was to structure it, the bottom side of our raptor was covered by smaller feathers, and the top is covered by these single big feathers. For reference, I've used Blue Jay. I found a bunch of high quality references. The only scaly parts on this dinosaur, on this sculpt, are the legs. So as per usual, I started by putting these VDMs. I marked them out so they don't interfere with the alphas that I put on the skin. So these are some free ones that I managed to get from ZBrush. They're not available anymore, unfortunately, as far as I am aware. And yeah, this part is more interesting because this is feather cards, and for this I've used a paid add-on which is called Hair Tool. It has an extensive tutorial on it if you would like to learn about it a bit, but also if you really want, I could make a tutorial on it if there's some interest. So yeah, let me know in the comments. So here what the main point is, you can create like a lattice, like a building geometry that the feathers will follow. I mark sharp the part which the feathers grow from. The rest of geometry decides of shape of feathers and how long or short they will be. And there's a lot of stuff that you can do with this add-on, like assigning certain feathers to certain parts of geometry, and I think it's really great. And about the anatomy of feathers, on the wings there's 3 layers of them. First one the smallest, and then they get bigger and bigger progressively as they go underneath the wing. Workflow for the tail is very similar as for the other hair cards, or feather cards, whatever you want to call it. I create a hair system. On geometry, choose the longer feathers only to be scattered on that system, and I mess around with some noise and random placement. Also a modifier to roll those feathers so that they droop down with gravity for a bit, which was a bit tricky. I had to place a plane in there. It just gets a bit complicated. And then an extra small layer here as a finish. The next step in the process is retopology, but for the needs of this video, we'll not talk too much about it because I don't want to repeat myself for like the 1 millionth gazillionth time. My rules haven't changed that much. It's just first establishing the main loops around the limbs, head, etc, etc. For the UV unwrapping, I'm gonna tell you right now, it's just following these main loops that I have created before. But an extra tip, you can pretty much, and here on Sketchfab you can find some quality models that have clean topology, and they will prove themselves to be great reference for your work. Sometimes I like to check out work by Jacob Bardsey. They're down in his posts. You can check out a Marmoset viewer widget, and there you can choose to see the topology. It is unsubdivided, so you have a great perspective on things. If you ever wanted to animate or pose your model, you've probably heard of rigging. Rigging is the process of giving bones to your model so that it moves properly. Here I am giving a large amount of bones all the way from hips to the head, and just it's a good thing to name them properly. For the tail, I just extrude one bone and subdivide it. It's a really clean workflow, to be honest, and I just discovered it recently. For the phalanges on fingers, I look at the skeletal reference in the background and I give the exact amount of bones as they are shown in the reference. For the feet, there's usually 3 bones for the middle toe and 2 bones for the side toe. Here, it's quite a crucial step. I add bones to the eye. Here is the target bone and here is the controller bone, so that when I move the middle point, that middle bone, the eyes are gonna follow its movement. Then I get into the hell of white painting. Actually, I'm not gonna talk too much about it because I did such a horrible job here, looking at it from perspective like a month later. So I'll just talk about the basic stuff. Yeah, as you can see, something happened to the eye and it just stretching so much. Then the claws, which are separate objects, and I paint them separately when parented to the armature. And thank God that I don't have to deal with spikes anymore, and feathers are so much easier to weight paint because they're flexible. Just remind me whenever next time I have to weight paint spikes, they need to be a part of the mesh. Then some more weight painting of feathers. It's pretty nice. Also, all the deformations have to be really smooth and nice. And yeah, as I said, this weight paint was so bad actually, so I will not talk about it. Yeah, even the eyes stayed in one place. We're getting very close to the end of the whole process, and this part is pretty important because this is baking and texturing inside of our beloved Adobe software called Substance Painter. It's good if you don't have to deal with the support system. Sorry about the Barney color palette jump scare. The dinosaur is not supposed to be pink. I am just masking off the areas that are not supposed to be pink, that aren't gums. Interestingly enough, actually I really wanted to go for the curved look, but I changed my mind like actually many times in this process, and I decided to go totally off script, and I guess this was supposed to be inspired by a pigeon, but yeah, I was even messing around with neon colors, but let's not talk about it. And then I just was messing around with HD Rise, so this was super chaotic. I honestly don't have much to say. I'm gonna be completely transparent here. This is where all of my works get tested, if I did the right things along the way. And this is also a good opportunity to fix up the rig. But this is not all, because this is final tweaks and rendering. Okay, maybe the white paints isn't my favorite part, but messing around with the composition really is. A good tip is to take the camera angle a bit below the dinosaur. It really makes it feel big and menacing. Here I am messing around with the silhouette and the pose. Also adding more and more assets from the add-on called Botanic. It's really, really great and worth your money. I think I said it before. Here I am looking for a good HDRI and adding more and more elements to make the scene feel more grounded, because AUSTRORAPTOR would most likely spend a lot of time on this swamp. So also another cherry on top is changing up the roughness. So I imagine this guy trying to catch some fish and it's just looking at the cameraman like, what are you doing here? Interrupting my hand. I'm also adding another plane of grass. So maybe this area is covered by a flood and this guy is thriving in this environment. And here I am also adding a bunch of bloom. I don't know why, but the word that was in my mind was ethereal. So I tried to replicate that. I'm also adding some extra... I'm doing some extra steps to add an oomph to this whole final render. Actually, this is not final, but yeah. This is the final render. And this project had to be one of the most interesting because I really faced my fears. I was really afraid of messing around with hair cards. And yeah, this was also one of the most procrastinated projects that I have ever finished. It took me a very long time, but here it is. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to hit the subscribe and see you next time.